Today, for the penultimate installment in Owl House Extravaganza, the marathon of Owl House reviews that I've been putting out to try to catch up with the end of Season 1 before any episodes of Season 2 had dropped in any form, something which I failed to do thanks to the episodes leaking. I am happy to say that we have finally gotten to the two-part season finale of Season 1. This is Agony of a Witch, the first part of that two-parter. And fittingly, considering the title of this episode, I agonized for a while over whether or not to just merge the two episodes into one review. Fortunately, or stupidly, depending on how you look at it, I did agonize over whether or not to do that before I rewatched the episodes. Once I sat down to rewatch them, though, it was pretty clear, like 10 minutes into this episode, that I needed to talk about it on its own. Like, this isn't going to be a particularly long review, because all in all, not a ton happens in this episode. It's more the same for most of its run. Like, the plot is extremely simple, as the episode plots in this show tend to be. Ida's curse is getting worse. She's having to use more magic to keep it at bay and more elixir to reverse it. So as she is at home prepping to create a magic cloak for herself, one that'll help her repel attacks from Lilith and the rest of the Emperor's Coven, Luz takes the opportunity afforded to her by a class trip to the Emperor's castle to steal an artifact on display there, the healing hat, which is said to have the power to reverse any curse. Her plan mostly consists of sneak in, steal hat, ? Profit, but it's still a thing that she intends to do. And so far, even though there have been some consequences here and there to Luz acting like a reckless child, for the most part, things have gone her way. So, based on the pattern of the show, there's a fair chance that she could pull this off, especially once her friends find her plans, realize what's happening, and decide to stay behind with her after the trip to help her do it. And to their credit, they make absolute chumps out of the Emperor's guards, fooling them at every pass, and get to the room with the hat. The only reason they don't succeed in pulling this off is because this show just got a lot darker. These kids, whether they wanted it or not, Luz in particular, just entered an entirely different kind of show. They've been off living in their own little pocket of this world, where things aren't quite so serious. They're not there anymore. The Emperor is able to see that they're there. He drops some gates over the doors to those rooms to keep them in. And we've met him at this point already in the episode, because Lilith has a plot here too. To set up the plot with Ida making the cloak for herself, we see Lilith attacking the Owl House again, with some guards this time, and can I just say, Hootie, you're freaking terrifying, and I'm scared of you, and I'm really sorry I made fun of you all those times. Please don't reach out of my computer screen and hurt me. But yeah, Hootie does take care of Lilith and the guards pretty easily, in fact, and it's... what's the right word? This is the same word I was searching for back when I was doing, like, Gravity Falls reviews, for example, right? A word for both terrifying and hilarious? Hilarifying? Does that work? Hootie is hilarifying. So it was funny, but also kind of disturbing to watch him work. And despite how powerful he is, Ida knows that eventually something will give. She'll be out when she's attacked, or someone will manage to break through her defenses, and she will need to fight more directly, so that's why she's making this cloak. But while that originally appears to be what that specific scene was setting up in this episode, was just Ida's regular episode B plot, right? We do soon after shift to Lilith's perspective as she returns to the castle amidst that field trip, invited to an audience in Emperor Bellus's throne room. And this is where we meet him. Just as the field trip is going through a section that displays images of the kingdom's history, where it does confirm that he did only take over 50 years ago and then establish the Coven system and the Coven heads immediately after that, which is really fast. But while that is happening, we hear that he's a good man who taught the savage wild witches how to use magic properly with his Coven system. We meet him, and we see that he is a sickly man sitting on a throne in a dark room with a still beating heart, a giant still beating heart hanging over his head. And this has to be the heart of the Titan, right? Because the castle is situated in its chest. This has to be the heart of the Titan. And there's all these pipes running throughout the entire castle, punched right through the walls, that seem to lead either to or from this heart, or both. It is a heart, after all. Which tells me that even if Belos only swooped in and took over 50 years ago, there was some kind of ruling family or ruling class or something here prior to that. Because it seems like the castle was here prior to that. Simply because all of those pipes are punched right through the walls. And I know I keep teasing it, and some of you guys are really, really about ready to strangle me because I keep teasing it without actually telling you what's in it. But this was the linchpin I needed to bring my entire King theory together. So I'm very excited about that. I'd forgotten some details about the visuals in this episode, so that was very cool. But anyway, Belos. He's a sickly man sitting in a dark room, and he seems to be made well, at least temporarily, by drinking the life out of Palismans, which is terrifying because I know some of those guys and I like them. And if the history stuff that we were hearing didn't already make him seem like some kind of colonial conqueror who came in to bring civilization to the savages, quote unquote, we actually get a scene between him and Lilith where he says, "You know what happens to wild witches," compelling her to work harder to bring Ida in, giving her until twilight that night. And it shows us an image that we had been told as part of that tour was him bringing proper magic to the happy wild witches. But it's recontextualized here over some screaming in the background to be him destroying them for not conforming to his ways. And Lilith knows this. And it not only recontextualizes that one image that we just saw and we're already kind of iffy about, you know, if you know anything about the history of anything, but it recontextualizes a lot of her behavior too. Because if she knows this, then she's been having to walk a fine line between freaking out over this knowledge and also being proud of her power and her station and also not wanting her sister to die. It makes her quest for Ida feel less petty desperate and more actually genuinely desperate for her sister's sake. Like, straight up, while there have been hints dropped that there was some more sinister veneer coating this entire world, Belos and all of the stuff surrounding him feels like it comes from a completely different show. In a good way, don't get me wrong, this isn't like a drag of the episode or anything. I love this. But it's very jarring and cranks the tension up like 10 notches at once to the point that you feel like you're just going to snap. So it was very cool of them that they released some of that tension pretty much immediately. The tension really reaches its high when, after those gates come down, Lilith, drawn by the sound of them dropping, finds the kids, realizes that she could use Luce against her sister and captures Luce, sending a message back to Ida, which is the other two kids, so they're safe at least. And then Ida shows up. Ida, during all of this, realizing how much Luce means to her, actually wove those magic strands from earlier into a cloak for Luce instead. King even baked her a cake. It's very sweet. And showing us that, showing us how much Luce means to Ida so definitively in that moment right before she finds out what's happened to Luce, means that despite how almost aloof Ida seems about Luce so much of the time, it's easy to buy what she does next. Her magic is only at like half, because she's having to devote so much of it to keeping the curse at bay. And she still shows up to fight Lilith seriously for the first time in the entire show. And having seen her confront her sister more than once in magic duels and in games of Grudge-Bee, and seeing how even though they don't get along very well, they're still playful with each other, they're still sisters, creates such a stark contrast with this moment. She's absolutely serious, and even at half strength, having to worry about Luce's safety from collateral damage, it's clear Lilith never stood a chance of beating her. And it's in a moment where their banter turns from banter to genuine attempts to hurt each other, with words that Lilith lets slip that she's the one who cursed Ida in the first place. Which is as good a time as any to remind all of you who have seen the show and to inform all of you who haven't that one of Lilith's main motives for trying to bring Ida in this entire time is that Belos claims that he can heal her curse. Which means, even though the way she announces this to her sister seems to indicate that she is kind of proud that she got one over on her sister, she still feels bad about it. And in particular feels bad that she can't do anything about it, which recontextualizes her behavior as part of the Emperor's Coven yet again, even if you think about it. One of the reasons she has remained so loyal to the Emperor's Coven for so long may be because Belos claimed that he could heal the curse and has been holding that over her head this entire time. Like, Lilith is still kind of a, I won't say terrible, but she's not a great person. Like, she makes some questionable choices and sides with some questionable people sometimes, but she's way more sympathetic at this point than she was even at the beginning of this episode. Even as she dangles a child over a pit of spikes, I still empathize with this person. And befitting an episode which reflects the true nature of this show, it doesn't end with everybody going home safe this time. Ida runs out of magic, transforms into the Owl Beast. This is supposed to be forever this time, according to some dialogue from earlier in the episode. And Luce has to go home to face King and Hooty without Ida, knowing that she is at least partially responsible for Ida being in that position to be transformed and captured. And the episode ends on a scene that I never thought I'd see in this show. A scene where Hooty knows when to shut up. This episode is absolutely spectacular, if I haven't made it clear from how reverently I've been talking about it up to this point. It's gorgeous. The Emperor's castle and the scenery around it is fantastic. And all the artwork that they create for the castle, for when they're running through the tour and telling us the history of this place, as incomplete as it still is, because this is one very biased, very doctored side of their modern history. But they're still fantastic. They look great, and I'm sure there's clues in them that even I can't pick up on. The relics are interesting in the fact that they've been here seemingly since the Coven system started. Says something interesting about the nature of that system. That these relics, which seem to be from the time of when savage magic was a thing, aren't needed anymore, even though the Coven system has to be based on something that was already in place. For him to come in, take over, and at effectively the same time install leaders over the various covens that would allow him more direct control. Something had to have been there already, meaning that more likely wild witches just later in life tend to specialize in one kind of magic or another, and he took advantage of that. And so either those relics literally don't have as much power anymore because magic has changed, or he has them locked away in his castle, I don't know, to keep some of those Coven members or even the Coven leaders from reaching their full potential. I don't know, but it's interesting to think about, isn't it? Like, Lilith says that they're useless. She even destroys the hat, which could have saved her sister, because she seems to have drank the Kool-Aid to the point that she believes that they're useless. But I don't think that's true. I think these things might be important in the future. It's also really interesting to think, if Belos is some kind of conqueror, who did he conquer exactly? Like, we know that there's the wild witches, but as I mentioned before, it feels like the castle was supposed to have already been here. So who did he take it from? And where did he come from? Did he come from another place in this world? Another setting aside from the Boiling Isles? Or did he come from another world entirely? This show started with travel between worlds, after all. It would make sense if this villain for Luce, Emperor Belos, because I do feel like he's more her nemesis than anybody else's, if he also came from another world the same way she did, and that would make sense because next episode we discover that he doesn't actually care about Ida. He just wants the dimensional door that she has. I also like all the implications through Ida's dialogue in this one that she knows how terrible Belos is. We just haven't really heard her talk about it because the viewpoint characters in the show are more often than not children. And also because, like, what's she gonna do about it? It's not like she can lead a revolution or anything. She's not a hero. That's Luce's department. But it is good to know that she, at the very least, does know that there's something more going on behind the scenes here. She hasn't bought into it and is just being stubborn about not joining a covenant. It's just, there's so much intrigue here. I don't even know how to begin breaking it all down. I'm going to have to go rewatch this episode a couple more times in preparation for that theory. And I imagine that I will find at least something small in each of those few rewatches to think about. New to think about. And I haven't even gotten into things like, if Bellows has only been in power for 50 years, that means that Ida and Lilith are part of the first generation who would have been affected by his system. And all of the things that that could mean. Like, that implies a lot of stuff. Like, they might have been alive. Like, we don't know exactly how old they are, I don't think. But they might have been alive when the original system was still in place. They might even have some memories of it. How interesting is that to think about? And I haven't even talked yet about how fantastic the animation was in the fight between Ida and Lilith. It's some of the best animation I've seen in a modern cartoon. Absolutely spectacular. And it was oh so satisfying seeing Ida really cut loose. Though I will say, as tense as the episode was becoming, up to that point, seeing how powerful she was got me more hyped than anything. Her getting taken after that was bad, and some of that tension returned, but the fight itself relieved a lot of that tension, and then it got me hyped for seeing what was next, rather than dreading what might happen. So the tension actually deflated a bit because of that fight, and yet I still don't begrudge it being here. It's that good. And I like how themed her magic is when she really cuts loose. Like, we saw this a little bit, I guess, when she had her other magic duel with Lilith. But, like, she makes a giant energy owl and she summons duplicates of Hootie to ensnare her foe. It was very cool, which is a bummer because we may never see her do any of that again. And I really would have liked to. I would have liked to have seen that and more of it, because I fully imagine she could push herself even further. Still, Agony of a Witch is one of the best modern episodes of our cartoon that I've seen ever, really. And I do remember liking this one more than the next one, even though I really do like the next episode as well. So we'll see if that remains true on this rewatch. As per usual, though, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of Agony of a Witch? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out the links to my various social medias and all the ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.